Though many have used the phrase mission creep distinctly, many have used it non-distinctly, exactly the way the breaching method employed, which had and has right through world wars. Also, where people use words like strategy, roles are inherent to, active to, progressive to the nature of debate, is the quality of collusion slash S, inherent to, active to, progressive to, styles, natures of logic. And I don't mean to hurt anyone. I don't, these people I don't even know involved with N.A.S.A, for example, with the class of 1993. Increasingly, and people involved with predicate acts with networks as the sources of their networks. And as CBS attached me to fake conversations with themselves. These are people involved with jobs and titles and difference slash S, every nature of difference, used to hide collusion slash S with the breaching methods use of difference slash S. And we have the same color eyes, while we have different color eyes at the same time, simultaneously, to discern how the breaching method used differences, used the difference slash S. We are not supposed to, in other words, we have nature's course demonstrating things to an extent that we have replaced a pretended theory because of how there is a syntax possession. For example, slash hyperpossession. For example, that distinctly the North and the South had roles with slavery before America's founders were born and through their lifetime. They were not allowed to be, they were seeking to find out who our founders were. That's why they had to leave it entrenched North and South. North and South were dictators. Otherwise, they were sent to anyone who was a part with that, with the, the spirit of, because it wasn't allowed to be the actual body of, where body is nature too, by the way. Because the body of nature shows us that it generates two eyes between in totally different species, individual species and each species is made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies. Right, where it's showing us two sexes are generating, two eyes between species bodies. So we can show that nature is generating it. In other words. So they attached me to fake conversations. These are also people that were messing with my market. I was going to take a market position. I was going to buy a stock called DACA on the N.A.S.A. And it was like 1/16th a share, and way up from there. But that was and that was and Eric Oliveri is one of the people involved with people who seat people in classes. And then the difference of guilt. They have a whole bunch of countries and people associated with Eric Oliveri, like a Joshua Stryker and a Robert Rodriguez, involved with a principal sex offender, and people at Trinity College, students and adults confirmed. Dean confirmed. He's involved with sequence shifts with them, forced with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and various people from the class of 1993 and before and after that class of Wethersfield, Connecticut. Involved also with retired police chiefs and their families in intimate ties. And their people are recording and confessing and demonstrating, confirming there are Mayan families involved with modern pastry, and that he forced that my neighbors, intelligence family near me, forced them to collusion. Modern pastry, good people, I'm sure. In other words, but these are people also like the Wethersfield police are forcing, and with the FBI and other agencies and people associated with them, and their educators are forcing them, lying to them about me, And that has to do with what they brought up with the people that have been touching me to fake conversations with themselves and using their kids too. Their kids as there's an O'Neill family that works with one of them or more work with campuses, and one of them in West Hartford is one of the ones recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed involved with various natures of organized crimes with the kids, and with whiting forensics, and with campuses in and intra cities, with a whole bunch of other countries, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, including medical families, putting fake transcripts in databases, personally and professionally, as collusion slash S with multiple courts, families, and their the differences of which age of them. And they lie about what they think when they hear people speaking, because I didn't bring this up. This uses at the same exact time. In other words, if you use correlation by what we are taught, by nature itself, let alone, in other words, they were placed with nature, they were placed with James Madison and what our plural founders communicated to us, declassified for us to understand, because they knew that nature would be demonstrating it too. And James Madison explained how they knew that. He said, who's they? Those behind the breaching method that forced sickly distinctly northern colonies and southern colonies, but also non-distinctly slavery, used functionally how everyone would blame it on other things other than themselves. And until that was as true more and more. But they would do it as styles, leaving out the breaching method that only allowed collusion slash S with that. It keeps the suits and ties, counters exceptions, countering themselves slash S with where and how everyone's debate, a certain type of child abuse you guys had, where they made people make statements, because there are only three branches of government and intelligence tied to them at the same exact time. A whole bunch that's at countries A through Z. Overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and international countries, news with worse than just fake news, to use a phrase of the president. They are preventing him from using that as evidence. They are forcing mission creep, where he, even his own people, then he has to ignore it even when his own people, because he said reciprocity and love, but also fake news. So, in other words, individuals only have so much time, and they're going to only 24 hours in a day, more than 24 states. And there's a city, and that's what, in other words, we're in a trap where each individual voice, and no matter how powerful a leader gets, they're above locations, areas, and states that were forced to shown they had to protect integrity ever spoke. For example, and to defend that, they have to appreciate the sciences the way they were written. And our founders left declassified for us not to use even their own. Yeah, I mean, even James Madison's writing, leaving out what he declared, they had declassified about that. About why and how even James Madison didn't have free speech, even though he was then, he was the only founder we know the name of, specifically. He was then a president slash chief also. And he still didn't have free speech because of the breaching method that was entrenched that he described to us. But we have A or B answers. We have uses of the names of the syntax of everyone, including James Madison's, shown offensively need to pretend while they are, really believing. They don't discern, exceptions and exception nature left out, exploited, other things, others ourselves, forced blame. Like, for example, for slavery. This breaching method keeps names on all sides of issues. It has the terrorists and the people countering them with using the words like extremism together. Americans need to understand how they just started using extremism in the news after the World Trade Center attack, and they used to promote radical as positive. Well, maybe it's radical positive or negative. Identity is positive is relativity to positive and negative simultaneously, where more and more identities, nature is being made. Nature is making more of itself through temporary slash lasting space nature as its own body, as a concentrated difference here as Earth. And we are in zero gravity. See, this preaching method uses the names of the people, the scientists, remotely. Criminally foreign influence slash hypercriminally foreign influence. While tactically delusions rot, good people used for evil. And no one self-values it. But this preaching method made and maintains exception slash S. In other words, so I'm not even going to say name because I never had a word of conversation, never was around him. Never, in other words, one of the people that was reportedly involved with N.A.S.A, who was involved with also the people involved with his neighbors, are involved with New Britain Superior Court since I was a kid, is involved planting evidences on all sides of people's houses. And next to that, in other words, all sides of issues, in other words, planting fake exceptions too. As people further involved inter-cities and intra-cities and intra-campuses and vertically and horizontally with criminally foreign influence slash worse, uses of databases, use of truths for lies. All right. In other words, and when they use like ally or enemy, you have to value roles with fake exceptions. Exceptions use tactical terror from how nature shows us to appreciate exception and exception nature. How it is all volumes, while not. But anyway, here, relative to a special difference, or a special difference is forced from here, which it also uses to show us how its body is the invisible but still discernible as parts of speech, of languages, and therefore of English grammar. But it also is the hyper invisible but still discernible that English grammar also is revealed to teach with other ancient languages. But even the differences of the languages was valued by the ancients to be able to discern better its difference, to not leave out the smallest finite detail. For example, it forces a quality of fact-achieving nature that reveals evolution's fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere. The identity is speaking for wealth. If you pay attention, they're incapable of affording to be discerned. A quality to be heard. A quality of fact with short words, let alone their protraction regarding convictions by nature itself, like we have black people's whites of eyes. It is no proper telling of American history leaves that out when and while a breaching method reassigned what it communicates and reassign roles with it by it. And I mean only permitted roles with that. Otherwise that body was sensed. And it wasn't just against that. And it was this too, and roles helping people from what that causes, which is nature itself. Anyone takes part with those laws against all women, against Native, against black people's whites of eyes, each one of them, let alone all of them at the same time, it's going to have nature itself show that we're using a bridge system. We're not using the one that generates individual species bodies of individuals and all group differences. Otherwise, it demonstrates we're using an abridged system. That's for correlation, those three parts. Correlation by. The rest is nature's complete identity. It is inseparable from each individual part of yourself and from all things. Vaccines. Then further, while simultaneously further distinctly but non-distinctly from the group parts and or active, and while further distinctly non-distinctly from the simultaneous, which is to describe how it's showing us constantly, increasingly. It is the distinct identity of hyper-simultaneous nature, making more of its body a forever nature through temporary/lasting space nature, and nature being a name hyper-additional for identity. And needing and for the same reason we need more than one name for a verb. For example, why we need more than one name for identity. We are in nature's identity of value/value progression as a quality of diffusion, positive or negative. But now this is through systems tactibilitary from its own. To speak for the law and for the Constitution unabridged, we have to examine why and how. Someone that wasn't even a lawyer, for example, relative to why there is a witch trials place next to the Webb Stevens Museum. Webb House with no the. Now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. But then and now, they have other communicated. Then our founders left declassified to be communicated to the founding locations. And so it's not to insult you guys when I say you were child abused. It's to point out the actual child abuse acts and the predicate acts with facts, method/s we have here by nature. We discern. Disbelieve. We need a who disbelieves act to counter where and how. Like, for example, the people who have been speaking on crimes and reading statutes and precedents. Like, for example, and speaking about, for example, in backgrounds regarding the validity of what is said or typed online. They are hiding their roles with predicate acts, with facts, federal evidences, crime rackets, black pupils. They were child abused. Forgiveness is because if we don't keep the breaching method that had sickly non-distinct, they had it sickly distinctly through different countries, through different international companies, rolls with it, all the news involved, the difference of guilt of the intelligence social there or next to it, the overt criminal enterprise, private ones, hundreds of companies, countries. This breaching method knew it locked in people dependent upon those theater tags on how to speak about the principles, like the three branches of government. They made, you guys were child abused to pretend they had integrity, but they did not and do not. Because there's a predicate acts with facts method. There's collusion/s that also come with use/s of it simultaneously, where and how a hyperforeign breaching method is a scientific value replaced right from James Madison's declassified communications to us and those unnamed founders who enabled it and who forced everyone who didn't want to help, because they were also not allowed to, force them to fake motives at the same time. Otherwise, they would have no ways to defend themselves, because people were only allowed to entertain collusions and use/s of the differences of guilt of the international companies, the countries, overt criminal enterprise, private one terrorists, the witch trials courts. Also, with what were witch trial courts about? Next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum, where George Washington had to come meet the French general right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War. They had to finish the counter-extortion plan and method that both George Washington and some French general together didn't have. Means too. There were proofs that those plural founders were Native Americans too, by the way, at least some of them. And even if they weren't one of those plural founders formally that we don't know the names of, they are what enabled it. Each modern country had this breaching method forced entrenched through its founding, though. And it only allowed collusion /S of all natures. Who wants to deny that our founders directed us to pay attention to where and how? All natures of wealth. That difference is used where it's not supposed to be used. It's supposed to allow, in other words, getting the Constitution on a bridge, supposed to allow a little boy or girl walk down from one of those big, huge buildings in New York City that we'd see behind the rap video. That were behind the rappers in the rap video. Since we were kids, we know there's a breaching method. Because we know the suburbs were designed by a torture, extortion, slavery method with a witch trials place next. In other words, and way worse, we sick people because they were only allowed to be. Otherwise, they were sentenced. And they had to pretend other. Otherwise, they were sentenced. And more and more nature's demonstration /S of that and of everything force blame on other things other than selves. Nature itself is showing us. I don't know about, I've never been to outer space, but we're in zero gravity. If we change our position, nature shows us we're right where it's about to be too hot, right where it's about to be too cold. Nature shows us how to make positive value nature progressions acts in nature, where the value of being fact-achieving nature is simultaneously greater than and more finite than even value of being physics. Nature showing us that Earth's a special difference through us as Earth, but distinctly. We are the only species that is criminally foreign influenced. And we're not self-valuing it, used remotely self-valuing it. Still, for the relativity, not just of understanding that breaching method you have replaced with other understandings. Please, I was next to the World Trade Center the morning of the attack and recorded predicate action. Relative to that method /S, I also recorded that we could all discern and that many wanted spoke. Even if the girl or boy would say it wrong, in other words, like say there was slavery and those same laws that were then, and even now. In other words, the difference of guilt too between the courts with that, or the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, other countries, and the nature of the people there, and the campuses, books know. There were only 3 branches of government. This breaching method knew that. Like, for example, made it like Tim O'Brien was influenced by adults to strategically say something to me about halfway, like not making sense, about his parents being police, to make it look like I had a conversation with him about police or anything other. And like in the hallway of a school, the only time I ever saw him on the school, on the inside. has something to do with the Leahy family too, and Rixie and Faglione, and a bunch of people in the British Superior Court involved with multiple police departments, involved with predicate acts, with the databases, with attaching people to fake ties to others, fake natures of ties to them. And then they had to hide live progressions years later. And then they had to hide that more and more. Increasingly, people next to Fox Connecticut News, Fox 61 News in Hartford, Connecticut, they have had collusion/S inter and intra campuses of all ages and natures. And it's not personal. They'll tell you this themselves. But this is all relative to predicate acts and how they brought this up, and over the World Wide Web. The courts recorded themselves. The British Superior Court is recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with people that brought in N.A.S.A also, and their roles with Russians and Ukraine with Central Connecticut State University in the Britain, Connecticut. There are increasingly collusions with people with Hartford Hospital and next to it, involved with Washington, D.C., and digital crimes, wire crimes, whole wire crime methods, whole judges, family members, military with them, policing with them, lawyers with them, their family members. Involved collusion/S with houses and businesses next to there too through time. People too temporary there or longer learning to the houses. Same ones next to the campuses planting and collusions with people. They're building upon predicate acts with the databases. One of the things this breaching method knew all the collusions everyone had with itself would be manifest as, and could be described therefore as a behavior racketeering method. So Fox News has people with N.A.S.A and with the military, involved also with translators and their educators and their campuses, involved with the World Trade Center attack, and since to hide it. And you guys don't follow mandated law regarding the predicate acts. WFSB recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirming they had collusions with people before the World Trade Center attack, involved with them after it. They faked conversations with me about it. They attached me to fake conversations with others about it too, including my family. And God knows they're leaking and doing worse. Increasingly, people at and next to the state capitol, and people involved with the corrections offices and judicial branch offices, also with prisons involved with the crime spots of their killers, and a principal child abuser, where the prison had collusion with names at and next to the body dumping spot, with the same principal child abuser and people involved with them, with that, and people with with another prisoner named Cintron is also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with the police chief Cintron, with people from Puerto Rico, people from all these countries, people from Russia, involved with him at the corner of Elm Street and Rocky Hill and Wethersfield, also with the networks, other networks, the sources, and with public television, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. That's another thing the breaching method knew that nature would demonstrate itself to us with as. Everyone rolls with an identity theft, fraud, slander method. The news media has roles, people repeating what they report, not just as fake news, as criminally foreign. So the differences of guilt, because this is manifested in other countries too. And then they have to hide live progressions. And then when things are confirmed to people like on Facebook, then they had to hide that. So they had to commit predicate acts and commit passion crimes and make it look like other motivations where and then they take your Facebook page. Then they have to do the opposite too. So they fake, are you being you? Then something like that happens again. They confirm things on Facebook. They have to take the Facebook page again. Increasingly, it has something to do with the Connecticut State Judicial offices and the corrections offices, And there's recorded conscious use slash S of the differences of guilt of names that next to a conjunctive to those locations into that. For example, Wethersfield Pizza House has war crimes with New Britain with New Britain Superior Court and with Wethersfield Police and with other people involved with them. With former director of the FBI, Robert Lexington, and an educator and people involved with, Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut. I never had a word of conversation in life except one sentence is Maria there over the Wethersfield police phone. Wethersfield Pizza House. He hung up the phone and had Wethersfield police call me. But there are others involved with them. And that's all I said to him over the phone. There are sexual medical offenders involved with his neighbors, too. Brian Bonin, the recorded confess, demonstrated, confirmed he sought me out to confess. His neighbors are involved with people that were in my fourth grade class, named South Sibiel, and South Sibiel's neighbors are increasingly involved with body dumping spots. And Dawn LaConche is also involved with the class of 1993. Never saw her on a campus in my life. John DeMorrow and others recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. He's involved with federal evidences crimes of them and with sexual and medical offenders of little kids and people involved with the spots next to them and roles with investigators used remotely, criminally poor and influenced, tactically delusions, hiding and faking things as collusion slash S. And then they have to hide those things years later. The intelligence community recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed that John Maiano is involved with people who have been planting evidences with people on my street that I even saw him with. They're trying to pretend other too. In other words, has something to do with their roles, planting evidences with the O'Neill family too. With Whiting Forensics is increasingly involved with people named O'Brien along Route 3 too. Conjunctions to it into that. And corners of streets. And roles with difference slash S. Roles with hiding directions to hide line progressions they're demonstrating. Like how and using how they have all the different countries involved. And by forcing me not to have a response too, I can't get a response. I'm trying to explain to you guys. Fix the fake news. They put me in big comments on a whole bunch of different organized crimes. You don't just steal someone's identity. They have the right to lie. They don't, because the interbranch did that at the same time. They're refusing to give me writing, and then made confessions tied to that. They've been torturing me not to say what I recorded them doing, abusing kids I know and ones I don't, including with medical or sexual offenders with badges and ones with gavels with all ages of their family members. I shouldn't have to beg for you guys. And you guys are leaking your roles with N.A.S.A and neighbors of them. I don't even want to use the person's name because we never even spoke too. I know it's a good person. Everyone's good. These are people trying to start fights between everyone. These are people putting fake things in records. Please, anyone from Wethersfield who remembers me. Last time when I said that on Facebook, they committed the New Britain Superior Court recorded themselves planting cover-ups. Put fake things with the people further involved with child abusers, already proven, leaders of the kids' first force too. They have roles with the first force part, while being used remotely too with other nations. Don't make it about people calling, that person says guilt, because they're all guilty together. And they're forcing me to collusion. Well, I want to be collusion with you guys. Get me off fake conversations with them. Interbranch and the news at the same time. Pick one, because there are overt criminal enterprises and private ones and terrorists at the same time, collusions with them. I'm not gonna. You guys are fake sides. I don't care if you shoot the guy because he's a terrorist, and then you guys will use extremism together. You're criminally foreign impulse, tactically delusions, raw readings of the religious books too, because you have collusions with the use of the difference slash S, where you think you shouldn't think. You should follow mandated law. Get on paper, one name and sequence. Let nature show you answers. You guys were child abused. Stop replacing the scientific value of the human fact, human nature breaching method that nature shows us. That it was about, that breaching method that replaced black people as white bodies, and that James Madison communicated about. It was replaced, and everyone pretending other has to use the words that people say, oh, that's what they said. What about that? It's not debatable. It's a scientific value shown to us by nature itself. There was a human fact, human nature breaching method entrenched. There were roles that the courts still had, the police form still had. They still have roles with the predicate acts and facts method, wire crime methods, use of readings of statutes, precedents that give benefit of the doubt at the last second. No, not, but that's why they can't afford it to be discerned online. Already recorded could be, they know there's a breaching method uses to use them remotely at countries A through Z, shows them how they could be, they're already used remotely. All sides of criminal and civil cases and themselves. Criminal enterprises, even when they're not involved with it. This breaching method knew and maintained self-value. Certain type of fake. Integrity of positive treatment and negative treatment at the same time. All sides, like the people defending our founders, as other than how, there was Thomas Jefferson was a drafter of the Constitution, so he was our founder. James Madison and unnamed founders had to force everyone to be part of the Constitution. They had to leave slavery entrenched. You're framing James Madison for slavery by leaving out too how Thomas Jefferson for slavery, because you're leaving out how Thomas Jefferson had to hide his roles, even as a president in chief. Even James Madison, the only founder that we know the name of, even once he was then a president / chief, he still didn't have free speech. We're supposed to understand this. We're supposed to understand how he described how they wanted nothing to do with slavery. There was a breaching method measuring and maintaining everyone. Not even just with internationally modern conversations. Forced. The difference of guilt of that, the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, international companies, the journalists, the touch-the-tea journalists. I'm not even a journalist. Journalism's criminally foreign influence this way. Many pray. When you guys debate, inherent too active, too progressive to your logic is demonstration / that's what the same. And they're only allowing people to speak that have influences, because most people agree with this. This breaching method shows the FBI has a bunch of people they use with Facebook involved with that, and Facebook recorded, confessed, demonstrate from their roles with agencies and policing of internet with courts too, changing and faking digital evidences, whiting forensics too with them, and with sexual medical offenders of kids. You should fear God for the people speaking about and using words like crimes, like law, like Madison. See Madison, Marbury versus Madison. Real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice. Black pupils, here, demand. So in other words, you're supposed to allow someone free speech to show the differences of guilt, use / S by the breaching method originally instilled. And we're supposed to pay attention, zero gravity. We change our position, we're going to change how hot or cold it is. Nature shows us why, how to get us to agree to get out of space. Grace. Peace.